This book right here, Homer's Iliad, is basically the movie 300 of classical antiquity. I mean, if Zack Snyder was a good storyteller, lived in 800 BC, and wanted to produce an epic action story, this is undoubtedly what he would come up with. Here you have it all: graphic depictions of violence, a questionable love story, and gods fighting each other in an extended land and naval battle. What's not to love? Hello everyone, my name is Heraclitus of Ephesus, and today we're going to be diving into one of the most influential works of Western literature, Homer's epic masterpiece, the Iliad. Today we'll be exploring the Oxford edition, translated by Anthony Verity and introduced by Barbara Graziosi, to uncover the timeless themes and enduring impact of this classic tale. To those of you who are new, the mission of this channel is to take you all through an exploration of the main works of the Western philosophical and literary canon. If that's something that you'd be interested in, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with others who may have this niche, eccentric interest in the classics. But without further ado, let's get into the text itself. Homer's Iliad is an incredibly titanic text, one incredibly hard to understand without the geographic, cultural, and literary context in which you are thrown in. It follows two opposing armies, the Achaean forces led by Agamemnon and the demigod Achilles, and on the other side the Trojans, led militarily by Prince Hector and his younger brother Paris, also known as Alexander. Paris, in his insatiable love for the Greek princess Helen, kidnaps and marries her against the will of his Greek neighbors, only to have an entire Greek army and navy fight to get her back. Homer drops us in the middle of an already raging extended naval and land-based war with the Trojans. The Greeks land in Asia Minor off the coast of the Aegean Sea and set to work immediately to plan to attack the city of Ilium, also known as the city of Troy. The Achaeans, also known as the Greeks, also known as the Danans, also known as the Argives, also known as the Aegeans, have just finished sacking a town in Asia Minor, only to enrage a priest of Apollo and have him rain biblical plagues on our Greek heroes. This tragedy sets our two main Greek protagonists, Achilles and Agamemnon, against each other in a bitter rivalry, which leads Achilles to temporarily excuse himself from the war. Achilles prays in secret to his mother, Thetis, to make his own army underperform in battle so he can emerge as a hero of the entire conflict, finally getting the recognition that he was neglected from Agamemnon. What a character. Once our Greek heroes arrive on the coast of Asia Minor, the Greek prince Menelaus, Agamemnon's brother, faces the man who kidnapped his newlywed wife, Helen. Helen is described as having a godlike beauty that is totally unprecedented in all the land. Menelaus and Paris face off in an intense duel, with Menelaus striking first and wounding Paris. However, Paris' life is spared by the intervention of the goddess Aphrodite, who protects him from further harm. Thus begins an epic tug-of-war between the Trojan forces and the Greeks. In the span of about 2 weeks of battle, the Greeks managed to push the Trojans back to the city, and the Trojans, with the help of Zeus, helps Hector to push the Greeks back to the seas. This happens about 2 or 3 different times on each side, and every time a force is pushed, you see an epic description of the different violent fights and skirmishes that individual soldiers have. It is reminiscent of the beginning battle scene in 300, just like I mentioned earlier. In this book, every fight is a slow-mo battle that vividly describes every thrust of the sword, every arrow shot, and every spear thrown, and the ways that one dodges his opponent's attacks, deflects them, or, unfortunately, succumbs to the attack. Let me give you an example from the text. Diomedes of the great war cry raged on with his spear, his fury rising, lunging at fighters left and right. And as when a swollen river bursts its banks, torrential rains from Zeus pour down, and the great mass of water sweeps away whole sections of the farmer's fields, the hard work of his hands, and drags it down into the sea. So, under Tydeus' son, the Trojan columns fell, dense lines collapsing in the dust, one after the other. He slaughtered them relentlessly. Athena seized the reins of Diomedes' chariot, and she charged straight at Ares, her fury blazing. With a sudden thrust, Diomedes drove his spear and struck the god's belly, where his armor gaped. Ares bellowed, a shattering scream as loud as 9,000 or 10,000 soldiers crying out in battle. Here you see a description of the Greek soldier Diomedes fighting and even injuring the god of war Ares. The Achaean warrior Ajax later has a similar encounter with the leader of the Trojans, Hector. And all throughout the book, you see duels, you see extended battles, and skirmishes described in an incredibly captivating way. The Greeks dominate some of the early skirmishes, but eventually Hector gets the upper hand and pushes them back to the sea, where they set up walled fortifications around the waters. Hector eventually breaches these fortifications and makes the Greeks retreat further into their ships. After being devastated, Patroclus, who is Achilles' best friend, asks Achilles to get into the fight. And if he does not, then maybe Patroclus himself can borrow Achilles' armor to go fight the Trojans, to which Achilles agrees with the latter. Now, donning Achilles' armor, Patroclus has some minor successes pushing the Trojans back, but eventually he does push them all the way back to the city of Troy, slaughtering a lot of them. Unfortunately, his spree is cut short by the Trojan Hector, who stabs and kills our brave hero Patroclus. Achilles, in his immense rage, asks the god Hephaestus to craft him a divinely powerful armor, and finally begins to don his infamous shield. We are 20 books into the Iliad, and finally, Achilles, in his flaming, unquenchable rage, decides to slaughter the mass of the Trojans and push him back to the city of Troy, along with Hector. Achilles' fight with Hector occurs in Book 22, and it is one of the most dramatic moments of the epic. After chasing Hector around the walls of Troy 3 times, Achilles, fueled by grief and rage over his best friend's death, Patroclus, finally confronts Hector. Hector, initially terrified, resolves to face Achilles and proposes a pact to respect each other's bodies after death. But Achilles, in his stubbornness, refuses. They duel. In the duel, Achilles, armed with divine armor gifted by the gods, exploits the weaknesses in Hector's and strikes him with his spear. As Hector dies, he foretells Achilles' own death, but Achilles, unmoved, will go on to desecrate Hector's body by beating it relentlessly and dragging it behind his chariot. This brutal act that was disgusting even to the most cruel of gods of the time underscores Achilles' unrelenting wrath and the tragic consequence of vengeance. Eventually, the king of Troy, King Priam, finds out about Hector's death and sets out to go retrieve it so that way he can mourn properly. He goes out and sneaks into the Greeks' camp to attempt to recover his own son's body and meets with Achilles. Achilles, in sorrow and in regret for his immensely cruel desecration of Hector, allows Priam to recover the body of his own son. And thus ends the story as we have it. Now, in addition to this being the first major epic and one of the oldest surviving pieces of literature known to man, this book also brings its reader immense philosophical and theological value. Some of the major themes of this book include the inescapability of fate, a force so powerful that oftentimes the gods themselves cannot thwart. such as when Zeus has to come to terms with the fact that he cannot save his beloved servant Hector. In addition, you see the sovereignty of the immortal gods who can choose to save or kill select men with impunity, such as when Aphrodite saved Paris from Menelaus. As Professor Michael Segru notes in his lectures on Homer, the primary virtue seen in Greece is that of the powerful, brave, and conquering warrior. In Greece, what it means to have excellence, arete, forgive my pronunciation, is to be either an unstoppably strong member of the warrior caste, such as Achilles, or to use your strategy and cunning and wits to outsmart nature, your fellow man, and the gods to meet your own ends, such as the case with Odysseus, who you do see more of in the Odyssey. But his wit and cunning is on full display in this book as well. He is even described as having cunning and wisdom akin to the gods, specifically Zeus. Nietzsche notes that this is a form of nobility that emphasizes virtue as being your capability to conquer natures and others. There is no trace of moralism or pity for the weak anywhere in this book. It is a cutthroat world, literally. And this is the world that Homer inhabits and illustrates wonderfully. This book captivates with its story, profoundly influences Western culture, and offers a notable level of philosophical depth. For these reasons, I can confidently recommend Homer's Iliad, the Oxford edition, as a must-read. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow me for more explorations of the main works of the Western philosophical and literary canon. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time. Peace.